Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. Now, this week we have a very interesting guest with some very interesting new information about what's really been going on behind the scenes in Congress on the issue of UAPs. I have two words to say to you viewers: Immaculate Constellation. So, Michael Shellenberger is a professor, author and journalist who's been very outspoken on issues such as free speech, censorship, homelessness and the environment. Most recently, he's been warning of the dangers of the encroaching threat of censorship by governments, media companies and NGOs. But it was Michael's sources on the subject of UAPs, UFOs, that first caught our attention in September last year, when he published a story revealing 30 whistleblowers working for the federal government or government contractors had come forward to give evidence or protected disclosures to the Office of the Intelligence Community Inspector General or the DoD's Inspector General, the Defence Inspector General, or to Congress. And in that article, he disclosed how testimony included both first and second-hand accounts of crash retrievals of UAP craft, reverse engineering programs by the US, the Russians and the Chinese government, and the testing of materials obtained from retrieved craft, active and ongoing government disinformation operations, kinetic military action with UAPs, contact and collaboration with non-human intelligences, and the successful reverse engineering of a triangle-shaped craft with unconventional propulsion. Now, it was Michael who had interviews with some of those anonymous whistleblowers back in September 23, and his story was full of truth bombs. How Stephanie O'Sullivan, for example, a former Associate Deputy Director of the CIA and Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is aware of a UAP crash retrieval program and reverse engineering program. And Michael's sources said she'd denied its existence to Senator Marco Rubio in a private meeting. Well, he's back. Michael, welcome to Reality Check, and I'm honoured to have you on, sir. Let's talk about this great article you've got this week, which is Pentagon is illegally hiding secret UFO programs from Congress, sources allege. Tell me more, sir.
Hey, great to be with you, Ross. Yeah, this is an incredible story. So a new whistleblower has come forward with a written report that this person has shared with some members of Congress and with me, and the report is quite extraordinary. It says that there is an unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation, which is the parent program, is the language used for exactly what you said: UAP, crash retrieval, reverse engineering, and apparently a very large database of high quality photographs, videos, infrared videos, apparently much more sophisticated documentation of many more UAP encounters than have been released. And so the article is really about the allegation that this program exists and that it has been withheld from Congress illegally. I think it's important for viewers to understand that the first article of the United States Constitution requires congressional oversight of all of the activities of the executive branch of the United States government. So whether or not you think there are extraterrestrials or non-human intelligence or anything, even if you think that all of this is just some sort of advanced craft, the allegation here by a new whistleblower, verified by other sources in a position to know, is that the Pentagon the Defense Department has kept secret this information from Congress, which is a violation of the Constitution and illegal. So I think that what we're looking at here is really a story about the abuse of power, including in potential disinformation from the Pentagon, just as much as it is this other question of what exactly are people seeing in UAPs.
Now, Michael, this is clearly all rubbish because the Pentagon has assured us, as recently as May this year, that there is no evidence that any non-human, alien or extraterrestrial intelligence has visited Earth. And that's a formal finding by the AARO office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is the Pentagon's UFO investigation office. It assessed that the, quote, inaccurate claim that the US government is reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology and is hiding it from Congress is in large part the result of circular reporting from a group of individuals who believe this to be the case, despite the lack of any evidence. So where's your evidence?
Yeah, and I think it's important for listeners to know that the all anomaly, the all domain anomaly resolution.
It's a stupid name. Let's just be honest about it, Michael. It's a stupid bloody name.
This was created by Congress, particularly Senators Gillibrand and Senator Rubio, to get to the bottom of the phenomenon and find out what the Defense Department knows. They put out that report, which you quoted from. That is a very thin report. I mean, anybody who is familiar with the case studies on UAP sightings over the last, particularly since World War II, but over time, knows that that is a very thin report. It's a dismissive report. It doesn't seriously deal with many cases. I think that there is the potential for a significant amount of circular reporting. As a journalist, you're always worried about that. This new whistleblower is not part of that circular reporting. I am confident of that. They also, this person did not know the other individuals who verified the name of this program. So I do believe this, and I have checked the credentials of this whistleblower. They are who they say they are. And so it is not part of it does not fit the theory of social contagion. I think the other thing, sorry, go ahead.
No, so I just wanted to double check. Let's talk first about what you can tell me about the credentials of your whistleblower without compromising any of your sources. So clearly, you have somebody in Congress who has briefed you on the contents of this whistleblower report, and they've told you who this whistleblower is. Have you been able to speak to that whistleblower yourself?
Yes, I am in direct contact with the whistleblower. I have verified, I've interviewed the person several times. I have verified their credentials and who they are, either in government or as a government contractor. I'm not going to say which, just to keep the universe of potential positions large, as I'm also not revealing their gender or anything else about them to protect them. I think you know, and your viewers may know, witnesses and whistleblowers on this topic, like other topics, but on this topic, they're very scared and their fear is very palpable. I don't think that they're faking it or that they're lying about their fear. I'm also comfortable saying that this person discovered this material accidentally. This was not something that they had expected to encounter. They encountered a large body of information that they describe as a database of this information that's available to others in the intelligence community, in the defense community. So there are, we've heard about that these databases must exist, but the allegation here is that there is a significant body of evidence that has not been made available to Congress in violation of the Constitution, a significant body of evidence that was not included in that AARO report to the public and to Congress. And so that's a serious allegation in and of itself. So I think before we get to what is the phenomenon, and that's a very important conversation, this is in some ways, this is a process story. It's an abuse of power story, and it's pointing to the inadequacy of whistleblower protections at large in the US government. That's also something verified to me by people in Congress, either as members or as staffers, who say that they understand why whistleblowers don't feel comfortable because they don't have the protections they need in order to come forward. So I think the burden is on Congress to protect these brave individuals who are understandably scared to go public because they have had their security clearances, their professions, and in some cases, according to some people, their lives threatened.
Now, Michael, when I did the introduction to you earlier, I very specifically used a section of your first article from September 2023, where you named Stephanie O'Sullivan, a former Associate Deputy Director of the CIA and Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And you stated that she was aware of a UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, but that she had denied its existence to Senator Marco Rubio. Now,
which is illegal.
I want to focus on that for a moment because of something I know that I'm not going to discuss in detail here. You've had no reason, have you, to doubt the accuracy of that assertion at all?
None.
The allegation on its face is that an officer of the US government has lied criminally to a senator of the United States.
Yes. A very serious accusation.
You know, the thing I find incredible is you made that allegation back in September last year, like a year ago, and absolutely nothing has happened as a result of it. It's I guess what I find depressing is the lack of interest from Congress, at least publicly. You know, we get the odd quotes from Ask a Poll, Matt Laszlo, as he doorstops politicians, and they say, you know, we've got UFO hearings coming, and, you know, obviously we're keen to get to the bottom of this. But where is the vigor? Where is the understanding of the degree of criminality that you talked about in your original article and you're now talking about in this new article? Because what we are talking about here is a constitutional travesty. It's a breach of, as you say, Article 1 of the United States Constitution.
That's right, Ross. And I should say for viewers who don't know, my bread and butter has been on covering abuses of power. We've covered abuses of power, including the weaponization and politicization of the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, on free speech issues, but also on retaliations against whistleblowers. This is absolutely a nonpartisan issue. It doesn't matter your politics. You do not want the agents, the investigative, security, police functions of your government being weaponized for private interests or political interests. That's a very, very dangerous moment. That's how you get totalitarianism. So for me, this is fun. This is first and foremost a story about abuses of power. You might think that what people are seeing, these UAPs, are just new military craft and it should be kept secret from the American people. That's fine if you think that. But they still are required by the Constitution to inform members of Congress about those programs. I note in my article that, yes, for super secret programs, you don't notify every member of Congress, but there is something called the Gang of Eight, which are the committee chairman and the ranking minority leader on the House and Senate Defense and Intelligence Committees. They are absolutely a requirement to tell them both about unacknowledged special access programs, of which Immaculate Constellation is allegedly one, as well as to notify them of CIA covert operations and other intelligence community operations, including potentially the retrieval or reverse engineering of exotic craft, to use the jargon in congressional legislation. But look, the bottom line here is that Congress needs to show some backbone. The Inspector General of the intelligence community said that whistleblower David Grush's testimony was both urgent and credible in July of 2022. Well, it's over over 2 years ago. Grush has testified in front of Congress. What's happening? I think that ultimately it's up to journalists like you and me and these brave whistleblowers to and the public to demand that Congress act and do its job and demand transparency and accountability by an intelligence community that on various issues, not just UAPs, is out of control, as outside of congressional supervision.
So your understanding from your source is that Immaculate Constellation is the code name for this unacknowledged special access program, the USAP. Now, let's get into the nerdy talk about what security classifications mean. There's special access programs, which are secrets that are protected, top secret, SCI clearance secrets. Then you've got unacknowledged special access programs. And then you have another category of waived unacknowledged special access programs, WUSAPs. And in the case of WUSAPs, there is, I understand, a very clear exemption for good reasons, for national security reasons, to protect highly classified programs. These WUSAPs are only briefed, I think, orally to members of the Gang of Eight. But the unacknowledged special access programs, USAPs, which is what you say Immaculate Constellation is, there is no reason at all why that could not be disclosed inside a SCIF to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, the Armed Services Committee, all of those oversight committees that are part of the constitutional requirements for accountability and transparency. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. There was no mention by the new whistleblower or the people that confirmed the existence of Immaculate Constellation that it was a WUSAP. It was simply an unacknowledged special access program. And so it should have been absolutely briefed to the Gang of Eight. I will say that one of the individuals who confirmed the existence of the special access program told me that simply publishing the name the name Immaculate Constellation would trigger surveillance of me. That it is located, is kept under very tight secrecy in the office of the Secretary of Defense. Obviously, that is a little nerve-wracking. I will say I gave the Pentagon. I emailed the Pentagon with a very detailed description of my article last Friday. They asked in the morning. They asked for more time. I gave them until Monday. Monday, they said they needed until the end of the day Monday. I had not heard from them by the end of the day Monday. So they had almost 5 days to get back to me. And you and I are recording this on Monday evening. So if there is an update to this, hopefully you'll mention that to the viewers. But I have not heard from the Pentagon, which you can interpret however you like. But I think the bottom line is still the same here. If you believe in democracy, which is ruled by the people rather than ruled by secret police, intelligence, and security forces, this is information that absolutely needs to be briefed by the DoD and or the IC to that Gang of Eight or to a broader committee of Congress.
Now, Michael, I can tell you there's a lot in your article that doesn't come as a surprise to me. I just haven't been able to corroborate with my sources what you've been able to find out about certain code names and what you know about the contents of that program. But what I can tell you is the reference made by your source to the fact that there is a database that's being kept separate, which was discovered. I am told that what the Admiral Tom Wilson memo written by Dr. Eric Davis says is correct, that inside the office of the Undersecretary for Defense Intelligence, there was, and I'm told still is, a completely separate database that you would understand and your source would understand goes by the name Immaculate Constellation. And it's interesting to hear from you so many years later that what Admiral Thomas Wilson stumbled across, and I have to add consistently now denies, is now being proven to be the case, that there was a completely separate database that was locked off from the rest of the Defense Department computer system, which would explain, by the way, why Edward Snowden, when he did his sleuthing, couldn't find anything about it. There is a
Yeah.
completely separate database which is kept completely airlocked from the rest of the Defence Department that contains all of this information relating to the UAP program. So let's go through this. I'm really interested to know more. Your understanding is that Immaculate Constellation consists of the capability to detect, quarantine, and transfer UAP and alien reproduction vehicle collection incidents before they are observed and circulated within the military intelligence enterprise, thus serving as a means of enforcing internal information security. Now, I presume UAP is a reference to a non-human craft, correct? If you're one of the millions of dog owners, you're likely aware that maintaining a healthy dog can be complicated. Joint discomfort, bad odour, lack of energy, smelly breath are just a handful of the troubles a dog can experience. But what exactly separates a healthy dog from an unhealthy dog? According to Dr. Marty Goldstein, one of America's most renowned holistic veterinarians, there is one potentially dangerous substance that you should stop feeding your dog immediately. If your dog has been feeling tired or not having the energy it used to, this one compound could be the reason. Many dog food manufacturers have this substance in their dog foods, and it's one that most dogs consume on a daily basis. This is something that's not being reported by most mainstream media and big dog food manufacturers. After years of research, Dr. Marty has decided to release an informative video to the public, free and uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you should stop feeding your dog, which you can find out right now by going to healthydog1.com/Ross or by clicking the link in the description box below. That's healthydog1.com/Ross. That's all one word, healthydog1.com/Ross. Just by making this one simple change, he was able to support his dog's overall health. You can also do the same thing right in your own home, and it takes just a few minutes a day. So go find that video now at healthydog1.com/Ross or click on the link below to find out right now. You won't believe how simple this is. Now, I presume UAP is a reference to a non-human craft, correct?
Well, I don't know, honestly, and I mean, I laugh a little bit because you always have a lot of information when you're writing an article and you're trying to figure out what to keep in and keep out, and I did keep that information in there because that was the information that the whistleblower has in their report. Alien reproduction vehicle. I don't think I'm not sure I'd used that term before. It's obviously going to raise a lot of eyebrows, and I should stress that I'm not saying I know that they exist or that I'm endorsing any other part of the things that have been said about that. But indeed, that is what this person has put in their report to members of Congress, notifying them about this database, which also, Ross, I wanted to mention because earlier I mentioned that there's a significant amount of visual data. However, the whistleblower in their report says that they also includes human intelligence. And so you're also looking at reports. There's one spectacular incident described in the report. I mean, there's several in the report. One of them is of an F-22 being surrounded by UAPs shaped like orbs and effectively escorted. Escorted makes it sound like nice, but sort of forcibly moved out of its mission area by these UAPs. So a real direct engagement by UAPs. I don't know, and the whistleblower is not saying what those UAPs are. The person's not saying that they're, non-human or extraterrestrial. Obviously, if they're Chinese or Russian or Iranian or something, that's a technology that is not out there and should be very alarming for straight defense reasons. But yeah, then the introduction of this term alien reproduction vehicle is effectively a reference to craft that are using not using typical propulsion and using something that is more akin to what people call anti-gravity.
So that's the interesting thing. There's two nomenclatures that we need to define in what your whistleblower's told you goes into his report. There's UAP, and that's grey. We just don't know at this moment. But alien reproduction vehicle, I can tell you, is very, very clearly a reference to a vehicle that has been constructed from non-human technology that is being operated presumably by either private aerospace or the United States government.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the language is very important because if you read what AARO wrote, there is potentially room within that report for them to be able to, uh, they say we haven't found any evidence of vehicles from extraterrestrials or from other planets. But they do seem to leave open the door potentially to this different category of craft. And so that is one potential is that, for me, as a fairly newcomer to this issue, I was not familiar at all with this discourse, but basically there is this idea, and it is in the whistleblower report, that the United States government is in possession of craft that it has itself made based on UAPs that it has captured, and apparently using anti-gravity as the means for propulsion.
Now, you mentioned, Michael, that there's a significant volume of intelligence reports in this database that the whistleblower describes, documenting first-hand encounters
Yes.
with UAPs or UFOs by defense personnel, and that this exists within databases accessible to the intelligence community. There's high-quality imagery, IMINT, and measurement and signature intelligence, MASINT, of UAPs. And the sources of this intelligence are a blend of directed and incidental collection capabilities positioned in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, as well as military and civilian aviation altitudes and maritime environments. I've got to ask, Michael, did your source show you any of this imagery?
No, I did not see any of them. I would have loved to, but I think it's fair to say this person felt that that would be just a severe risk. I mean, that's the kind of thing that this person felt and they could end up in prison, essentially, if they had attempted to capture any of that imagery. I did also, though, want to say, Ross, because I didn't mention it earlier and we haven't talked about it, it's important to point out that, and you just sort of said it, these are images and other data collected by sensors that are operated by the U.S. military and by the intelligence community and potentially others. But this is not just photos and videos shot by civilians or even commercial airline pilots with their cell phones or even sophisticated cameras. This is shot by U.S. government. Much of this material is captured by U.S. government personnel. And so the language that they use in the report is that there's a clear chain of custody on this evidence. And so, in other words, for people that pay attention to the popular discussion of UAPs, there's a lot of videos out there, and often we don't know who shot them or where they came from, or it's not a clear chain of custody. That's the gold standard as any investigators. You want to know exactly who shot it, who's had custody of it. That's the whole chain of custody, so that if anybody wants to do further investigations, you can go interview the crew. So, of course, one of the most famous examples is the famous Tic Tac sighting, where you have 4 Navy pilots who are all incredibly credible Navy pilots who tell the exact same story about what happened when they encountered this UAP. And so that's the level of quality that you're talking about, and a lot of it, not a little bit of it. And we have heard we've heard in the past, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Christopher Mellon has said that there is a significant body of that information. We've also heard Lou Elizondo and David Grush say that. But this is the first time, to my knowledge, that anybody has actually named this unacknowledged special access program and described in some detail both the kinds of evidence gathered as well as the shapes of the UAPs. And I should just say that this report, I hope at some point it does become public. It's a fascinating, there's much more in it than I could summarize in the article, but there's just a fascinating description of different UAPs that we've all heard about, orbs and tic-tac and discs and triangles and boomerangs and all the different, you think about the Phoenix Lights. And so you sort of, if you have some familiarity with the big UAP cases, it's very striking to see that there is a database of UAPs captured apparently by the Defense Department and the intelligence community in a database that Congress, at a minimum, the Gang of Eight should have access to.
So let's go through the detail that you were given. I'm intrigued to hear that you heard a lot more detail than you were able to put into your article. But as I understand it, the report that has been given to Congress by the whistleblower describes in detail various UAPs and how from 1991 to 2022, the most common UAP shapes reported in this dataset were spheres, orbs, discs, saucers, ovals, tic-tacs, triangles, boomerang arrowheads, and irregular organic shapes. Mm-hmm. Your source obviously had an opportunity to look at that database. Can you give me some information on the size of the whistleblower report? How many pages is it? How much detail is being provided to Congress?
Yeah, the report. So I have the report. It's, I think it's 25 pages. It's very well written. This is a professional, somebody whose job it is to interpret information and evidence, somebody who obviously feels moral duty to the Constitution. Similarly to David Grush, this is a person who obviously loves their country and is patriotic and does not feel that this information, if it got out, would undermine national security. I hope very much that the report, that some version of it can be made public, because this is taxpayers paid for this research, as you mentioned, over many decades. I am not sure that people, maybe people really know what it is. Maybe they don't, but either way, there's no, I don't see any reason. I didn't see anything in it. And I'm not a journalist and with all due respect to Julian Assange, I would not just release information willy-nilly. I also care about the security of the United States, as does this person. That's why I gave the Defense Department almost 5 days to get back to me. But it has an incredible amount of information, and I think there's just been a lot of gaslighting on this issue. And one of the things I describe in here, and your viewers probably know this history better than I do, but basically the CIA created something called the Robertson Panel in 1953, which came out and said that all of these reports should be not only aggressively debunked, reports of UAPs, but ridiculed. And ridicule is a very severe form of disinformation, because it really attacks the character of a person. It's a way of calling people mentally ill. I think it's very cruel. And so I think that this report, validates that people were not crazy that reported these things, that these things are real physical manifestations, objects, phenomena, that these incidents are real, that they've been viewed by many enlisted soldiers, that a campaign of repression and threats and fear has been waged against people. And then the gaslighting, which is also, it's a tactic of abusers, continued from the Robertson Panel in 1953, and then of course your viewers probably also know there's something called the Condon Committee in 1960. I think it ran from 66 to 68, which also dismissed all of this. And so I'm also somebody that is very concerned about government disinformation. And are multiple cases of acknowledged and proven disinformation, including by the Air Force Office of Special Intelligence. And so we don't want the government, you don't want the government hiding things that are in the public's interest to know. And you also don't want the government spreading disinformation and ruining people's lives, because these are real people's lives we're talking about here. And there's so far, no justification has been given for this level of secrecy, censorship, and disinformation.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty, some of the detail that you do reveal in your report. And there is, as you've already acknowledged a little bit earlier, an absolutely incredible incident involving an F-22 Raptor, which is the top frontline fighter jet in the United States military arsenal. And it describes orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of a patrol area. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. Now, the thing about that, Michael, is I often cop it from some viewers who are very much of the rosy view about non-human intelligence, that they're all benevolent and kind. What you seem to be describing here is something where, at the very least, a UAP or a group of UAPs are essentially trying to behave like an adversary. They're boxing in a fighter jet. What's going on? What does the whistleblower think about that finding? And what conclusion did you reach on the basis of the evidence that you read in the report?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, I mean, so again, I want to stress, I'm new to this. I have, beginner mind on this issue. I mean, I'm not by any means an expert on it, or a military expert. So with those caveats out of the way, I mean, the first most obvious thing you're struck by with that particular case is that this technology or form of life, or whatever it is, adversary, is demonstrating dominance. I mean, just the most simple basic thing is that there's somebody if there's an interaction, it can be cooperative or among equals, or it can be hierarchical, and there's dominance by a greater power. And in this case, that those craft or phenomena or whatever are demonstrating dominance. And that does have to do with that TikTok incident that the Navy pilots describe. I mean, I think you could argue that it wasn't not necessarily, we don't know if it's, say, hostile. In other words, nobody was shot down and there's no evidence that anybody was harmed. But dominance is about power and about a demonstration of capabilities. And so clearly, in that case, and there are other cases in that report, which again I hope is made public, these are phenomenon showing dominance. It's not showing benevolent space brotherhood. It's demonstrating dominance at a very basic physical level. You don't need to do a lot of interpretation to see that that's what's going on.
So in the report, you actually describe how one UAP maneuvered very close to the jet, to the starboard of the cockpit, and it established a rigid spatial relationship with the F-22, so that when the jet was rolling and diving and trying to get away from this object, it stayed fixed. That's what I find fascinating. Whatever the technology is behind these objects, what they were able to do was track exactly what the F-22 was doing. It couldn't shake it.
Amazing. I mean, I think, anybody that knows some of the history of this, it sounds a lot like Foo Fighters, from World War II, these similar orbs. I mean, orbs are very a common UAP, but not, because I think an important piece of context is that, and I describe in my article, I give a lot of space and explain the conventional explanations of this. How might a UAP debunker, how would they describe this? One of the ideas is that this is sort of a natural phenomenon. This is maybe a new plasma or a kind of ball lightning. Doesn't seem to be that. It would be an extraordinary because it's moving clearly with the jet. And so,
Does it acknowledge that the jet? I mean, a lot of these pilots in the F-22 have got phased array radar systems, which are incredibly top of the line radar. Is there any acknowledgement, to your knowledge, in the report as to whether any of these objects were picked up on radar?
that's a good question. On that specific case, I'm not sure, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because yes, there is a significant discussion of tracking these objects on radar. And so radar is a big part of the evidence base. The report also mentions that that they are documenting both the UAPs and the effects of UAPs through sensors tracking their physical effects on the Earth environment, that are maybe not visible, or they say are not visible. So
What
so
does
what's being emphasized? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what does that mean? What do you mean their physical effects on the Earth environment?
I can't remember if there was anything more specific about it, but it was, I think the language was atmospheric effects of these UAP. And I don't remember any more detail than that.
One of the things you do mention, there's another incident that you talk about where an orange orb was watched by the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier. A sphere descended from high altitude to about 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of this aircraft carrier. It emitted a soft orange-red light which didn't illuminate the ocean or the flight deck, despite the appearance of intense luminosity. The surface of the UAP was observed to be dynamic, roiling like the surface of the sun. And it was this bit here in your article that intrigued me. It appears to be acknowledging biological effects on humans, the consciousness, psychical engagement by these objects with human observers. It said afterwards, observing personnel felt as if they snapped out of a trance and a
Mhm.
sense of personal unease. That's a really interesting biological effect of this phenomena, isn't it?
Yeah, and very impressive that it's acknowledged by the military. I mean, I think, as you know, this phenomenon has a physical nuts and bolts hardware part of it, which is the level at which I think I mean, which many people are uncomfortable even talking about, but certainly it's probably less uncomfortable than some of the psychological, or you might even say spiritual, effects that people describe relating to the phenomenon. So I was impressed to see that that had been properly documented by whoever it was in the U.S. military that had done the interviews with the crew to describe these hypnotic effects, because it's clearly been part of the history of the research of UAPs and their effects on people, is that people describe having lingering effects, both bad and good. Certainly a sense of awe, which may just be awe at some more powerful technology than we have, but also something that's sort of uncanny and doesn't lend itself as easily to language, that these soldiers on a aircraft carrier were apparently describing to some investigator.
So, Michael, the big question is is there any basis that your whistleblower understands this could possibly be legal? I mean, one of the most commonly speculated explanations is that perhaps as early as back in the days of Harry Truman and Eisenhower, there was some kind of presidential executive order that was made that enshrined this legacy program in secrecy and somehow removed it from the need to put it under congressional oversight. To your understanding, as somebody who understands a lot of the constitutional law of America, I can't think of any basis upon which the American Constitution could be superseded by presidential order. Can you?
No, because it's right there in black and white in our Constitution, and it's Article 1. It's like the First Amendment. It's like they put it first for a reason. It's at the heart of our system of checks and balances. It's I mean, as I get older, I really appreciate the brilliance and the genius of the U.S. Constitution and this idea of overlapping powers and checks and balances. And so I think that this is more evidence that the system is out of balance, that the executive branch, that elements within the executive branch, elements within the defense and intelligence communities are outside of democratic civilian control. And I, for one, don't want to live in a country that is not under civilian democratic control. We don't want to live as slaves or as serfs. That's the whole purpose of the United States of America. So I can't imagine any court, much less the US Supreme Court, upholding the right of the Defense Department or the intelligence community to withhold this information at a minimum from the Gang of Eight. And I'm not entirely comfortable with just 8 members of Congress. That's not language from the Constitution. That's a more recent interpretation. But I think more broadly on this issue, and I say this to my friends who are, very, very skeptical, like really don't believe any of this, and who think it's either some combination of hallucinations, disinformation, and social contagion. I always say, great, if you think that, then you should be the biggest advocate for disclosure and transparency and accountability. Because if this is some new, if it's if the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians or some foreign adversary, or if it's the US government, Article 1 of the Constitution still applies, and the Supreme Court would require its enforcement if it ever came to them.
Now, Michael, you've had the chance to talk directly with this whistleblower. And I have to say, for me, a lot of the time when I've met people from the legacy UAP program, the decisive moment where I became to believe that this is real is when I actually got the chance to meet these people, look them in the eye, and make the judgment that, yeah, they were telling the truth. I couldn't trip them up. You've had that opportunity with your own whistleblower, this person who's written this whistleblower report to Congress. What's your gut feeling about the truth of the allegations that there is non-human technology being held by the US government and or private aerospace without congressional oversight or transparency?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I should say, I've dealt with a lot of whistleblowers over the last couple of years. We had 2 incredible sources tell us who the first people to get COVID were at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And those people were scared, but they felt the public needed to know. And by the way, Wall Street Journal confirmed our reporting 1 week later. These whistleblowers are terrified. They're really, really scared. They have reason to be scared. I think they are psychologically healthy individuals. I don't think they have. There's nothing I could. In my past work, I've dealt with mental illness. I interview homeless people on the street who are psychotic, including having UFO and alien psychoses. I recognize that could be psychosis. These people are not in psychotic states. These people are mentally healthy. They've passed all sorts of tests to be where they are. I have another whistleblower. I can't say a single thing about this person other than they're totally terrified. And I've been encouraging them to go to Congress, to go public, that they'll be safer that way. But it's very hard to fake that kind of fear. Most people are not very good actors. I mean, most actors are not very good actors. It's very hard to fake that level of fear, especially when you're dealing with people, who they are and where they sit in various agencies or contractors, and they're in a position to know. And this person, I will say, I have met them in person. The whole way in which we met showed deep alarm and concern about their safety, and they are still very nervous about this and feel that their obligation to the public interest trumps their fear, because of course courage is not acting without fear. Courage is acting despite having a lot of fear. And so I think these people deserve a lot of credit. They're really American heroes as far as I'm concerned.
So I want to pin you down, Michael. Where do you stand? You've got a gut instinct. What's your gut telling you about the veracity of the person you've been speaking to?
I'm sure I'm very confident they're telling the truth. I mean, you never want to be 100%, but I'd say 95% that they're telling the truth. Um, Same for the existence of this database and this program. It's a very specific set of details. I don't think that it doesn't come from the lore. It's new. I did verify this. Always, you can't do anything with. You should never do anything with a single source, in my view. I do have other sources that confirmed that name, and like I said, the confirmation came with a warning that it could result in my surveillance. So I think it's a strong story. I will also point out, Ross. I wrote I think 3 pieces last year on UAPs out of probably 300 articles. A lot of people wanted me to keep doing UAP stories. And what I said was, I'll do a story when I have something really significant that I'm willing to, put my name on and stand by. And so this is the first story in over a year, and stand by the story. And I stand by the sources. I believe that they're telling the truth.
Why do you believe? What does your source tell you? What are your sources telling you about why the cover up? I mean, I lie in bed at night and think, why don't the US government just come out? Why doesn't Joe Biden just walk to a lectern in the White House and say, ladies and gentlemen, people of America, people of the world, we are not alone? Why the lie?
Well, yeah, not only that, but it's also like, why the persistence of the lie over such a long period of time? I mean, if you believe, if I believe my sources, and I suspect your sources have told you the same thing, there was every expectation that if Hillary Clinton had been elected, because she was very close to John Podesta, who's somebody that I've known for a long time. We don't always agree on many issues. We don't agree. That's why I like this issue. Is one of the pleasant things about it is that it's very bipartisan and non-ideological. But there was some sense in which the Clintons were going to do something. There's also, I mean, you've seen Donald Trump has said. I mean, I think for anybody who thinks, I mean, the most basic allegation here, the most fundamental allegation is that the U.S. government knows more than they're telling the public or Congress. President Trump has just confirmed that multiple times in recent podcasts in recent days, saying that he knows things that are not public. So President Trump was briefed. Why didn't he make it public? Why have Biden and Harris not made it public? John Podesta was in the White House for a different issue, but certainly for no lack of influence. Everybody has the same set of reasons. There's some sense in which there's just fear of public panic. And I think there's some reason to worry about that. I also think it can be overstated. I think that there's some genuine concern that these technologies are an advantage to the United States against our earthly adversaries. I find that plausible. And then I think the other more troubling conclusion would be that there's some bad things that have been going on as part of this. I'll use the word cover up, because that's what it is. There's some troubling behaviors that have gone along with the cover up. I mean, David Grush is on the record saying that people have been killed. I don't have evidence of that. That's not my claim. I'm saying that's what he said. I've certainly seen other people say it. I did do a whole story last year on UAP witnesses and whistleblowers reporting threats, including death threats, not just in the United States, but around the world. I find those witnesses credible. I don't think that I don't think that sane people allege that the US government or government officials had threatened them unless it had occurred. So I worry that there has been some bad behaviors that have gone along with a cover-up, and that the various folks that are still in what is sometimes referred to as the legacy program or these unacknowledged special access programs, that they're worried about some consequence for themselves. I mean, look, they didn't release all the JFK files, and Mike Pompeo, Trump's former the CIA director under Trump, said that it's because there were people still alive who were involved. Well, I mean, I don't find that particularly persuasive, and maybe we need some agreement on amnesty. But that also seems very plausible, because we certainly have seen in other cases how bad bad powerful bureaucrats can behave when they get into those positions.
It's funny, I once flippantly wrote, I think it was in my book, Michael, In Plain Sight, I wrote about how, the lying bastards that are responsible for this cover-up should be tarred and feathered and dragged around Washington behind the back of a Humvee. And some idiot tried to suggest I was advocating violence against the gatekeepers. In fact, what I strongly believe is that there should be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I was
Yeah.
I was privileged to be able to cover the South African post-apartheid regime hearings as a journalist, and I thought it was incredible to watch boss Secret Service killers who'd murdered people in the freedom movement apologising and admitting their crimes to the families of the people who'd been killed. And it was an incredibly therapeutic moment. And it has stopped, I think it stopped South Africa from falling apart into civil war.
Mhm.
And I can tell you, I know the allegations of people being killed are true because I've been doing my own investigations, which people may soon see the result of. There are very, very grave illegalities and criminal actions and morally reprehensible actions that go to the whole issue of questioning our humanity as a species behind why there's the cover-up. And I just want to come back. There was a great quote from Matthew Pines, our mutual friend, a former very senior intelligence analyst, in one of your original stories from September last year. Matthew said to you, "There may be an acute concern that if this becomes another church committee level scandal, it would pour kerosene over the burning embers of distrust in the political system. And whether it's the worry over technological surprise from strategic competitors like China, or that too many people have already spilled the beans, the political leadership may feel they have to manage things as much as possible behind the scenes as they face an unstable geopolitical dynamic and gird for an exceptionally fraught 2024 campaign." That comment, that quote by Matthew Pines, I thought was very prescient because he's been proved right. It has been an incredibly rocky campaign. But do you think any of that is an excuse for non-disclosure, non-transparency, non-accountability to the American public and the rest of the world about what America really knows?
No, absolutely not. And I come back to, for me, this is an abuse of power story first and foremost. And by the way, I 100% agree with you. It's more important to get the truth out and to end this decades long government disinformation, ridicule, character assassination, cover up, because it's really causing harm to real people and it's undermining public trust in the government. I'm not anti-government. Like I object to false accusations against the FBI, which happen by some individuals on social media alleging things that are exaggerations or not true. I think it undermines and waters down the when you have serious abuses of power that you need to get to the bottom of. We're overdue for another church committee hearing. I mean, that's the famous 1975 post Watergate moment where we learned about MK Ultra. We learned about assassinations. We learned about efforts at mind control, things that sound like science fiction. We learned were actually being done by the CIA. I think we're overdue for a period of reform. I mean, America's founders, when they said, you need a revolution every few decades, that's really what they meant. Is they meant that you need a reform, you need a cleaning of the house, a cleaning out of the closets. And so, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it should not be about revenge. It should be about truth and reconciliation, just like the South African model showed. And let's extend it to the JFK files and the UAP files and other abuses of power that we've seen, because ultimately that's a concern for all citizens, not just for people that are concerned about this particular issue.
Well, Michael Shellenberger, where can people read your article, which is, by the way, a fantastic read?
Thank you so much. People can just go to public.news, which is our Substack, but also the same content is available on X, formerly Twitter, at Shellenberger is the handle, no C, just at Shellenberger.
And Michael, can I ask you this? Is your whistleblower, have they given evidence in camera or in any testimony at all apart from their report to Congress? Have they been called to give evidence under oath?
I genuinely don't know the answer to that question, but I can say that they have talked to either members of Congress or their staffs, and there are efforts underway. And I also should say that uh, members of Congress and their staffs really would love to hear from other whistleblowers. And if they're scared, I also want to say I can work with them to protect their confidentiality. I think the reason that whistleblowers talk to us is because we are extremely careful about protecting our sources. And I also know the congressional staffers who are also serious professionals at protecting people. And so you'll be safer if you come forward and have contact with a journalist like myself and trusted congressional staffers than if you're out there on your own. So a message to anybody out there that's thinking about coming forward.
I'm really sorry to keep on going as long as I am, but I'm really fascinated to get as much detail from you as possible. Clearly, this has gone to a committee before the Congress. Are you able to say which committee it's gone to?
I'm not comfortable saying, but anybody that knows how this stuff works will be able to guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence. But moving on from that, one thing I'm really worried about is there's been a lot of evidence. You're quite right, by the way, that last year you said that 30 people had given evidence, and it's actually a bit more than that now. But one of the things that's been worrying me is a lot of this evidence has been given in camera before staffers and legal counsel, because one of the methods that politicians use to essentially immune themselves from being too close to sensitive revelations is to send senior staffers who are legal counsel. So my understanding is a lot of the testimony has been given in camera before legal counsel and senior staffers on these committees, like oversight committees like the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee and the Oversight Committee. Have any politicians, to your knowledge, directly engaged with your whistleblower? And if so, why not?
I genuinely don't know the answer to that question, but I did want to say, because we haven't said this before, is that I don't trust AARO at all. And I would actually actively recommend whistleblowers not talk to AARO. I don't think that they're trustworthy. I'm sorry to say. I also don't trust the ICIG or the DODIG anymore. I just don't think that I don't think they're doing their jobs, and we haven't, like, there's what's going on with all these people that have come forward. I think all the action is at the level of Congress and the public, as mediated by journalists and the media. And so if I were a whistleblower and I were scared, that's the two. I would find a journalist. Doesn't have to be me. I'm happy to work with anybody, but a journalist you trust. And I'm also happy to connect people to those congressional staffers. But that's where this has to take place. We have to strengthen protections for whistleblowers. I mean, I appreciate if you're the head of a big bureaucracy, you don't want your disgruntled staff running off to be whistleblowers all the time. On the other hand, if the issue's not a big one, then it's not going to matter for you anyway. But we don't have adequate whistleblower protections. I mean, for me, that's like a whole separate problem and story. We need to strengthen whistleblower protections. That's Congress's job. It needs to do that. It should be one of the highest priorities for anybody who cares about good government, certainly for anybody that cares about getting out the truth and disclosure around UAPs. Because as it is now, I just think many people, quite reasonably, are just too scared to come forward.
Well, Michael, I hope your article plays a significant role in encouraging those whistleblowers to come forward, and congratulations on your piece. Immaculate Constellation is quite a name. I wonder if it's a play on Immaculate Conception. Maybe we'll never know. Michael Shellenberger, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross. Great to be with you.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.